Okay, so it's probably easy to think of Sylvester Stallone as this like paragon of 80s masculinity, right? You got the muscles, all the badass fighting. But a new documentary will make you think differently about Stallone. Today on the podcast, you'll hear why Stallone is much more complicated than you may think. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Hey, look, the obvious place to start requires no setup. We're going to start here.
Rambo, this is Murdoch. We're glad you're alive. Where are you? Give us your position and we'll come to pick you up.
Murdoch. I'm coming to get you.
You can picture it, right? You can picture the whole thing, the whole scene, the veins bulging in Sylvester Stallone's right forearm. He's clenching the CB radio mic stand right before he thrusts it into the enemy's face. It's a whole thing. It's a scene that sticks in my mind from Rambo First Blood Part 2. It is the movie that turned Sylvester Stallone into the biggest action hero in America. When that movie came out in 1985, Stallone was already famous for Rocky, but Rambo ended up creating this image that we have of him, this iconic image of Stallone as the guy with the muscles. He doesn't say much, right? But he just lets the machine gun do the talking. That's the Stallone that a lot of people think of. And since then, it's been an image he's never quite been able to shake, no matter how much he's tried. Well, there's a new documentary that makes the case that actually he's a uniquely gifted storyteller who's trapped in the body of a blockbuster action star. That film is called Sly, and it was directed by Thom Zimny, who won an Emmy in 2018 for his 2018 documentary, Springsteen on Broadway. Sly is going to make its world premiere this weekend at the Toronto International Film Festival, and then it's going to actually come out on Netflix in November. When I talked to Tom, I started out by asking him, hey, what is it about these iconic figures, iconic all-American artists like Bruce Springsteen, like Sylvester Stallone, that draw him in? And here's what he had to say.
What I recognize in both the journey with Sly and the journey with Bruce Springsteen is a common focus on the work. And they came from pretty much the same time of the 70s. That's where they both broke very big. But what I recognized in both those stories is that desire to keep creating, examine the past, be in the present. And I really stepped into the Sly film not knowing where I was going to go, but I quickly found out that I connected to his story with his childhood and how he explored his work with his childhood. So I recognize a little bit of Bruce in this narrative of an artist looking at the world, and also my desire as a filmmaker to take down just an iconic point of view of these artists.
Yeah.
Try to get past the rock star or just the action hero,
because they loom so large, right? Like those images of them loom so large. Yeah. And
that's played out in a lot of different decisions of what you choose to focus on and the details you bring forward, and also how you visually present them, both in archival and the way you shoot them.
Right. So in the film, you capture Sly at this kind of interesting, tender moment in his life, right? He's packing up his belongings at this mansion in California. He's making some plans. He's going to move back east, which is a perfect starting premise for making a movie about someone who's going to start to look back at their life. How did you arrive at this as like the framework for the movie? Like how did that allow you to sort of build a movie on top of it?
Every time you step into a film, you should look at the space. Space is a character.
Right.
It reflects the details of someone's life. And I had a fantastic producer working with me, Braden Aftergood, who works directly with Sly. And he told me that he was at Sly's house and Sly was unpacking cassettes. And that image as a filmmaker, instantly, I saw it as an opportunity. Just having Sly talk about, well, I'm going to have to take down this statue, or I'm going to have to pack up these sculptures of him as characters. I could just see visually in my mind's eye that this would be a powerful metaphor and theme of change, of his history, and also something that you can keep going back to, because a move is a perfect visual theme to keep coming back to trace time, and also Sly's understanding of what he needed to do to shake it up and keep creative.
what's amazing with this, like, despite all of Sly's accomplishments in his life and all of this wealth, as you start filming these, you immediately sense, you know what? There's still a real fire burning inside of this man. Let's listen to a clip from the movie.
Do I have regrets? Hell yeah, I have regrets. What is healthier? To live under the illusion that you could have been great, or actually have an opportunity to be great, and then you blow it and you realize you're a failure.
How would you say the combination of Sly and his personality, but also the physicality, how would you say that affected the way that you directed him in this movie?
It was a huge impact just to be in the same space as Sly and watch him speak and take a space, physically take over a space. The musicality and the rhythm of him delivering a simple explanation of, I was living in New York. It was jazz. I respond to music. A lot of my stories are based in music. I could hear in Sly that I had to step away at times and just let him tell these stories so that things would unfold, not in sound bites, but they would unfold in the beauty of Sly's rhythm, but also film him in a way that he wasn't contained to a chair. We were not in a setup of a talking head confessing and a traditional documentary language. So at any moment, if he wanted to reach over to the sculpture and touch it, or if he wanted to go to a shelf and pull down a script, he could. Right away, from my very first introduction with Braden to Sly at his house, I knew I would not hold this man back. I would not keep it contained to a linear questioning. Where did you start? How was your childhood? I would bounce all around. I would keep up with the speed of Sly, who's just like the clip you played. You can hear he has a beautiful musical tone in his voice, but also I could hear an honesty and a vulnerability, and that only comes through what I would say is a little bit of time and trust. And Sly gave that to me, so I'm enormously grateful, because at the end of the day, he went to all different places and details of his life that he never touched on, and I wasn't chasing anything salacious. So it ended up being very organic in unpacking his life.
If folks are just dipping in, this is Commotion, and we are talking about a new documentary about Sylvester Stallone's life. It is called Sly by the filmmaker Thom Zimny. Tom, one of the things in the film makes clear is that Stallone's life and art have actually been deeply related, intertwined, in ways that audiences won't always realize. Let's listen to a scene from the first Rocky movie in 1976. This is the film that Sly wrote. This is Rocky and his coach, Mickey.
You know, I've been coming in for 6 years. In 6 years, you've been sticking it to me. I want to know how come.
You don't want to know.
Yeah, I want to know how come.
You want to know?
I want to know how.
Okay, I'm going to tell you. Because you had the talent to become a good fighter. And instead of that, you became a leg breaker. Some cheap, second-rate loan shark.
It's a living?
It's a waste of life.
Man, oh man, that immediately takes me back, to that moment. Hearing that scene now, after all those conversations you've had with Sly, after you've made your documentary, what do you see in that dynamic between Rocky and Mickey?
I see a central theme in the scene. When I hear the dialogue between Rocky and Mickey, I recognize the central theme of chasing a lost father, and Sly having that impactful ability to write in the way that he did, where he can touch into details of his own life and know that people are universally going to be connecting to this. Mickey symbolized so much of a character that represented hope, a father figure that he didn't have in his own life. So Sly took the trauma of his childhood and translated it and healed to a degree with exploring those ideas of going beyond just seeing the world, seeing you as a bum, having someone say to you, you can do more. In Sly's world, I stepped into knowing a little bit about Rocky. I stepped into knowing a bit about the the beauty of Rambo and some stories.
Yeah.
But what I didn't understand was how deeply connected these characters were to him growing up, and how a lot of those characters were reflecting the loss he had with his father's relationship. So that's another theme that comes across really strong in the film. And I remember that one of the first conversations I had with Sly was he referenced Rambo being like his dad in the way that he stood in the room and with intensity. And I knew suddenly that I was in a place that, to me, was familiar from the other films I'd worked on, which is the artist unpacking his childhood and exploring some of those losses, like a lost father, in the work. This is a theme that is apparent in the work of Johnny Cash and Bruce Springsteen. So it was in my wheelhouse in many ways when I started to really sit with Sly and realize that the writer in him could go down this road and explore these things.
Well, I want to come back to Rambo in just a moment, but Tom, can I ask you, have you seen the Barbie movie?
I have not seen it. I almost saw it 3 times. I know there's a reference.
Right.
I know.
This is what I wanted to sort of bring up is that, there's a moment where Ryan Gosling's character, Ken, comes from Barbie Land and comes to the real world, and he's exposed to patriarchy for the first time. This is the first time he sees men in control, and this kind of like a flash of Sly in the giant, fur coat and no shirt underneath it. And that's the image. That's the image that Ken takes back with him to the other men to be like, let me teach you what men are like. I mean, there is something about Sly as like the arch male figure of the last 30 years or so. How do you think he sees himself in relationship with the way that he shaped how men view themselves over the last little while?
I don't want to speak directly for like how Sly sees himself, but what I found in unpacking the 70s Sly and the 80s action figure was fascinating, because in all of it, he's challenging himself and putting himself through obstacles. And a big part of that in the film, he talks about how it's that challenge stems from the way he was a kid, where he had to stand up to his father. So the male physicality and the characters that he's creating and the way that he's pushing himself all circled back to this childhood. He loved Hercules. Hercules represented a father figure for him that gave hope. And if you think about Rambo, if you think about an 11-year-old kid's life-changing watching Hercules, and then the concept of Rambo, all this ties together. So I think he did create these iconic male symbols. But I didn't want to hold the film just to that presentation, because I felt like Sly was an artist, a writer, and I wanted to get at a space of seeing him beyond the iconic figure to being vulnerable, revealing that he has pain and the journey of his life and the love of his family.
The idea of Sly perhaps recreating what he had in Hercules and becoming that for other young men. That's interesting to me. The idea that, Stallone's status as this action hero does, and quite often, end up overshadowing the depth that he had as an artist, as an actor, as a writer. The first Rambo movie, right? First Blood is considered one of the great action movies of the 1980s. But it doesn't end with bombs and bullets, right? It ends in tears with Sly delivering this dramatic speech. Let's listen to the dramatic speech about the hardships and the traumas faced by Vietnam veterans.
In the field, we had a code of honor. You watch my back, I watch yours. Back here, there's nothing.
You're the last of an elite group. Don't end it like this.
Back there, I can fly a gunship. I can drive a tank. I was in charge of $1 million equipment. Back here, I can't even hold a job. Fucking guys! Ah!
Tom, in the original script of First Blood, Rambo was supposed to die by suicide. The ending was even filmed that way initially. But then Sly comes in. Sly insists that, he's got to live. What is that approach to Rambo's story? What does that tell you about Sly's own life story?
That moment that Sly discussed, rejecting the idea of the vet being shot down, was an extremely powerful moment to film. When he revealed that, he was in my editing room and we had a whole session and we talked, and he read the speech that's at the end of the Rambo film. I realized that this theme of hope has been throughout his life.
Mm-hmm.
And that the power of his writing is that he steps into these characters so honestly. You really believe Mickey, you really believe Rocky, you really believe the pain of Rambo, because he has this power that I felt like was not being recognized as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
But also these bigger ideas that he will fight for and challenge a studio and challenge a director, that he didn't want to carry on that notion of pain,
mm-hmm.
that the vet would be destroyed by the world. He wanted to leave an audience with this idea of compassion. So that speech happens and they hug. And those are the details that I felt like were getting lost in the Sly story.
Yeah. That
this man not only had an intense childhood, but he was able to take it in his art and find redemption in creating characters that reflected the idea of hope.
Tom, before I let you go, we're going to go out on a song that is heard frequently throughout your film. It is kind of like a recurring theme, but it is not Eye of the Tiger. It is not at all Eye of the Tiger. It is To Hell with Poverty. It's a 1981 single by the British post-punk band Gang of Four. American action movie heroes and arty British punk bands don't usually have a lot in common. They don't make obvious, bedfellows. What's the significance of this track for you and the Sylvester Stallone story?
You carry your life into these films, and the power and the sonic quality of the Gang of Four instantly matched the visual intensity of Sly. I cut this film, and I remember the day that I put that soundtrack on, that song, The Hell of Poverty, and I started to play with the imagery of Sly in his house, Sly walking, Sly's history. And there's a beauty sometimes when sound and picture come together that you just know you're in the right space. I remember it from the screeching guitar that opens and thinking, that's Sly. That's the power of Sly. It's not it's not the horns of Rocky. And I wanted to surprise the viewer, but I wanted the intensity of Sly. So I leaned into the beauty of Gang of Four and their guitars, and also took a little bit of my own life, remembering those guitar sounds and mixed it together. That's the magic that happens in the edit room.
From 1981, Gang of Four and To Hell with Poverty. That song is featured heavily in the new documentary about Sylvester Stallone called Sly. Before that, you heard my conversation with the film's director, Thom Zimny. Sly gets its world premiere this weekend at the Toronto International Film Festival. And then it comes to Netflix in November. All right, before we go, we're going to switch gears here to something a bit more serious, a bit more emotional. I'm sure you've seen it in the news. It's been really hard to wrap your head around the scale of these tragedies in North Africa. Within just the past week, thousands of people died in devastating floods in Libya, and in Morocco, thousands of people were killed by an earthquake. This week, we've seen musicians who are among the many people rallying to help. Fadul Lalu is an artist who lived in Montreal for decades. He was on stage in Morocco when the earthquake happened.
So I was actually performing a show 20 kilometers from the epicenter of where the earthquake hit in the Haouz region, about 50, 60 kilometers away from Marrakesh in the Agafay Desert. So I'm an international musician, and I was performing a series of shows there. My show just had ended, and we were putting away the equipment, and at 11 p.m. the earthquake shook there, and the land opened, some buildings collapsed. It was the scariest moment of my life and of the lives of all the people that were around. And I myself, as a musician, I put on our Instagram a PayPal account link, and people are sending through money, and I'm going every morning. I wake up at 6 a.m. and I go to the biggest supermarket like a Costco, and I go buy clothing, food, and I load up my SUV and I hit the road. And I actually met a group of lawyers from Marrakesh, and we all load the cars and go there and spend the entire day. It's very physical, but it's worth it. It does make a change.
That is musician Fadul Lalou. He's describing what he's doing to help. And Gims is a French rapper whose wife and kids were at home in Marrakesh when the earthquake happened. He jumped on a plane as soon as he heard the news, and he has been helping out ever since. Here he is, handing out supplies.
J'avais jamais vu le Maroc comme ça, Marrakech comme ça. C'est vraiment très fort. Même des ressortissants français, belges ou hollandais qui reviennent ici à Marrakech pour aider. Franchement, c'est vraiment beau ce qui se passe. Mon message, c'est un message de solidarité. Donc continuons à aider. Il y a des gens encore qu'on découvre, il y a des corps qu'on retrouve encore. C'est juste fou, quoi. Donc il faut continuer à aider comme on peut. On a vraiment besoin de tout le monde.
Well, you just heard there the French rapper Gims in a town that was mostly destroyed by the earthquake. He's talking about what it's been like to see people rallying and how much more help is needed. We're going to go out on some music by the Moroccan-Canadian musician Fawzia. This is her song, Thick and Thin.
You wake up and you try to breathe. You ask yourself what's wrong with me. You're broken like you've never been. You try but lose again. I know you got doubts and you see no way out.
That's Fawzia with Thick and Thin. For the latest on what's happening in Morocco and Libya, go to cbcnews.ca. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Take care of yourself.